A chieftain of the new Nigeria People's Party, Buba Galadima, has questioned the readiness of President Tinubu's administration to conduct free and fair elections in 2027. He alleges that state institutions are being used to favor the ruling party and that early campaigning undermines electoral impartiality. Galadima claims moves by the APC-led government to weaken opposition parties signals an unwillingness to allow a genuine contest. He also raised concerns over reports of a controversial INEC chairman appointment, warning it could trigger unrest. Presidential aides have remained silent, while President Tinubu has reaffirmed his support for INEC's independence and ability to deliver transparent elections. To discuss this, we are joined by political analyst Nelson Ekujumi. Nelson, you're welcome. Good to have you here this afternoon. We'd like to know what indicators should we look for to assess whether the Tinubu administration is preparing adequately for a free and fair 2027 election?
Well, thank you very much for having me. The truth of the matter, or the facts out there, is that INEC is an independent institution. And you and I know for free that INEC has been conducting its affairs independently of any other organs of state or individual. So this statement coming from Baba Buba Galadima is in tandem with his antecedents. This is an elderly citizen who play politics with everything under the sun. If you remember what his usual rhetorics during the reign of late former President Muhammadu Buhari, he has not changed in any way from his antics. And just like we always know that a leopard cannot change its spot, Baba Buba Galadima is behaving true to type. Because when you accuse a political party of weakening other political parties, are you telling us that those other political parties are annexes or they are departments of the ruling party? Well, the answer is absolutely no. So if other parties cannot get their acts together, then they should, they should better close shop and, join other parties that are virile and viable. So Buba Galadima's latest statement is not new. And that is why nobody is giving heed to his comments. These are very uncharitable comments coming from elderly citizens that you expect to be responsible and civilized in comments and in conduct. But repeatedly, Baba Buba Galadima has shown to be opposite of what comes with old age, which is about wisdom.
Okay. Nelson, once again, I'm going to ask how effective you think, or rather how independent INEC is. I heard your stress there regarding how independent they are. But while you're answering that, what reforms, if there are any, has the Tinubu government undertaken to enhance electoral transparency?
Well, the enhancing electoral transparency, if you have followed our democratic trajectory, has never in any way been, played by the government of the day. What we have had in the past is INEC trying to ensure that its process are transparent and accountable, and the government of the day attempting to sabotage it. If you remember in 2000 and during the reign of former INEC chairman Professor Tairu Jega, when he brought about the idea of the e-card reader, the then administration in power, as at that time, that was the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan, did every subterranean moves, to thwart it. But INEC and other stakeholders insisted on it, and we resisted it. I, in person, I was one of those who resisted, the antics of the then government to thwart INEC from, conducting a credible, and a transparent election by making attempts to get rid of the use of card reader, which came into place to limit electoral malpractice by voting by proxy. And the present INEC under Professor Mahmoud Yakubu has upped the ante with, improvement on that e-card reader with the beavers. So I don't know where anybody gets the notion or the assumption that it is the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration that will enhance the credibility or the independence of INEC, because since this administration came into office, I've not seen any interference by the government in the responsibilities of INEC. INEC responsibilities are clearly defined in the Constitution. It's a question of the law, and I don't know where the Constitution gives the present administration powers to interfere with the conduct and activities of INEC. I've not seen it in our Constitution, and I've not seen it practically being exercised by the government. Okay. INEC has always conducted its affairs since the time of Professor Tahiru Jega, okay, to the present occupant of the seat, Professor Mahmood Yakubu. INEC has always conducted its activities independently and creditably. I say that with all sense of responsibility.
All right, Nelson, so it's one thing for INEC to look in the mirror and say that they're doing their duties absolutely independently. It's another thing to actually take that feedback from the public. So I ask you, what is the current level of public confidence in the electoral process and the Tinubu administration's commitment to democratic principles?
Well, like we say in journalism, opinions are free, but facts are sacred. We have seen INEC become the whipping boy when parties lose election. And when the battle for the electoral disputes move beyond INEC to the courts become the next, whipping boy. INEC's image as of today is solid with a lot of Nigerians, even though we recognize that there are some persons, no matter what INEC does, because you and I must, admit one fact, that Nigerian politicians are sour losers. These are politicians who will lose an election, and the next thing they will claim they have been robbed. And when you ask for evidence or fact to substantiate that robbery, the next thing they will tell you, you are siding with the other party. So it is not out of place to expect some persons, to want to lay the blame for their failings, for their shortcomings on the doorstep of INEC. They are free to run with it. But you and I know that our electoral system is guided by laws, and the law stipulates that if you are convinced that an electoral malpractice has occurred, you should avail the court your evidence, and the courts will do the needful, because the role of the courts is to uphold the law. And the Constitution stipulates that INEC must conduct elections in compliance with the provisions of the law. So if INEC conducts elections outside of the provisions of the law, we all know what happens. Such elections are usually thrown into the dustbin. Even recently, you remember, the local government election in Rivers State was annulled by the courts. And the last election that was held, some persons have gone to court, and the court have thrown out their case and said, look, the election was well in consonance with the provisions of the law, even though those elections, the elections I've just mentioned, were conducted by, by subnational, electoral body. That is the State Independent Electoral Commission. Right, so people are free to run wide with whatever they want to say. But a lot of us who have our eyes on the ball, who remain solidly behind INEC, who support any institution or state that is conducting its affairs in line with the mandates given to it by the Constitution. Because we are a country governed by laws and not by the whims and caprices of individuals or groups.
Country governed by laws. That's a very good input there. But Mr. Ekujumi, let's ask, how well has INEC done when it comes to reforming for inclusivity? And I'm speaking about the bigger part of the demographic. Those are the young people who live, think, eat, do everything on social media, but seem to be disenfranchised when it comes to INEC's reforms. How has INEC done when it comes to the youth?
Well, the reforms of our elections or electoral system, if you have followed our trajectory, of which yours sincerely has been an active participant since 1999, I was one of those who worked on ensuring that the people with disabilities, assess the basic requirements to enable them exercise their franchise. And that is why it became part of the electoral system, whereby on election day, braille is made available, glasses is made available for those who cannot see properly. And also, we also ensure that people with disabilities can easily access voting points. All these things have been taken into consideration because
Nelson, just a second,
this responsibility,
Nelson, just a second.
was not that of INEC alone.
Just a second.
Collective one. So
just a second, Nelson.
To assume that the electoral reforms will be undertaken by INEC alone, it is a collective exercise.
Nelson, I think you might have misheard me. I'm asking how included do the youth feel? I'm asking this question in light of what's happening internationally, where the youth have been responsible for much agitation because they do not feel represented inside of these reforms that INEC here in Nigeria has been putting in place. They do not feel digitally represented because that's where they live. So how has INEC reformed its processes to include these digital apparatus?
INEC processes have been reformed in such a way that it is compliant with global best practices. And but sadly, a lot of our youths, we live in a society today. I'll tell you for free, I'm no longer a youth, but by the Nigerian parlance, you can still call me a youth because I'm still under age 60. But I know very well that as a young man when I was growing up, I was very much interested in what was happening in my society, in my community. I didn't have the distractions of the social media. And even when INEC has taken its game to the social media to entice.
I think we might have lost Mr. Ekujumi there, but thank you very much, Mr. Ekujumi, for entertaining our questions. Thank you indeed.